I'd like to say good morning to everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Dennis, for the invitation to stand yet again. And this week we will be wrapping up a series that started some weeks ago called The Blessing and Dedication. And this week we will be going to Genesis chapter 12, beginning at verse 1, and going all the way to verse 5. And I'll be reading out the Amplified, so if you follow along in yours as I read aloud. It says, "Now in Haran," and that word Haran, I want you to keep in mind that it means parched. And we know that parched means extremely dry or thirsty. So it says, "Now in Haran, the Lord said to Abram, go for yourself, for your own advantage, away from your country and from your relatives and your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you with abundant increase of favors and make your name famous and distinguished, and you will be a blessing to others. And I will bless those who bless you, who confer prosperity or happiness upon you, and curse him who curses or uses insolent language towards you. In you will all the families and kindreds of the earth be blessed, and by you they will be blessed themselves." So Abram departed as the Lord had directed him, and Lot his nephew went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abraham took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they went forth to go out to the land of Canaan. So in using for thought this morning, continuing in the series, The Blessing and Dedication, the road less traveled. The road less traveled. Now, when we think about moving, you could think about a college student getting ready to go to college their first year, and the uncertainty of what lies ahead has a tendency to create a sense of anxiety, excitement, and fear because it's not known what lies ahead. Now, when we look at Abraham in this particular situation, when God called him in Genesis chapter 12 and in that first verse, Abraham had every reason to be fearful because God called him to leave everything that he ever knew as familiar, to go to a place that he had not been. He didn't know what he was going to encounter when he got there, so he did not know what to expect. But you see, he didn't question God's call. He just packed up his family, packed up his servants, and he went. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He followed the direction of God. Now you see, we have a tendency as Christians in these times to question the direction of God. You see, Abraham went with no ifs, ands, or buts, but we want to know who, what, when, where, why, how long we're going to be there, how much it's going to cost us to be there, when are we going to get back, are we there yet? Are the kind of questions that we want to ask when God directs us into a new thing. Now, the thing that we have to wrap our minds around is that we cannot be afraid to follow even when we don't understand what the call means right off the bat. You see, God is not going to call us to go somewhere if he has not already prepared the way and made it safe for us when we get to where we're going. Now, John chapter 8, verse 12 reads as thus. It says, "Once more Jesus answered the crowd. He said, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not be walking in the dark, but will have the light, which is life." So, would we be afraid to follow the light even if we did not understand where it was coming from? You see, when we're in darkness, Jesus shines his light to drag us, to bring us out of that darkness. So we must not fear the light that we're being instructed to follow. You see, but the enemy lives to confuse us because he knows that if we do not have an understanding of what's being put before us, we won't trust it. Now, there's a saying that says, what man does not understand, he fears, and what he fears, he tends to destroy. Now, we can go back to the 1960s and look at the civil rights movement and see that the reason that there was so much tension between minorities and whites was the fact that the whites did not understand the minorities, and nor did the minorities understand what was going on with those who were white. And the problem arose that they began to destroy each other because of lack of understanding of one another. Now you see, the enemy knows that we will destroy our own destiny if we do not understand where it is. So you see, we cannot be afraid to move because all we know is that God is calling us. See, we've got to trust that God knows exactly what he's doing. You see, that is why he is sitting high and looking low, because he knows exactly what he's doing. We cannot be afraid to move out of where we are, because you see, the thing is, we deserve more than what we are allowing ourselves to have right now, and God has called us to such. Now, the other thing that we can learn from Abraham's decision to move is that his choice to follow God was not enough. You see, Abraham understood that he had to place action behind the decision to follow God. Abraham knew that he had to move toward the destination that God was calling him to. If we look at the first verse in Genesis chapter 12, it says, in the King James Version, it says, "Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee." Now, God called Abraham to come out of his comfort zone in order that he may put him in a place where he could bless him infinitely. You see, the thing that we've got to realize is that sacrifice is necessary when we make the choice to be successful. You see, I have been on my own journey, and I understand that the choices that I'm making now are going to pay off on the road that I'm traveling. You see, I made the decision to change my work schedule because I knew that I needed to cater it around my school schedule. So the thing that I had to understand is that even though I may not get as much sleep as I would like, even though I may not be able to spend as much time with my family as I would like, the sacrifices for success are necessary. So therefore I have to move myself in the direction of the blessing. I have to come out of my comfort zone so that I may be able to move in the direction of the blessing. You see, now the enemy will try to convince us that we are not good enough to move in the direction that God is calling us. We're not eloquent enough to speak in front of people. We're not intelligent enough to think for ourselves. We're not confident enough to stand before people when there is adversity. But the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 25 and 26 says this: "For the Lord shall be your, be not afraid of sudden terror and panic, nor of the stormy blast of the storm and ruin of the wicked when it comes, for you will be guiltless. For the Lord shall be your confidence, firm and strong, and shall keep your foot from being caught in a trap or hidden danger." So we can see from those two particular verses that we have nothing to fear as long as we remain within the covenant of God. As long as we remain connected in that covenant relationship with God, God is going to keep us protected from any hurt, harm, or danger that will come on the journey that is ahead. Now, the final point that we can take from Abraham's journey is this: he did not fear who he left behind. You see, in chapter 11 of Genesis, Abraham's father settled in the place with his family called Haran, and he died there. But when God called Abraham to go, he did not think about leaving his father buried in the place that he was. Abraham picked up and he left. But see, for us as Christians in these times, leaving folks behind is one of the biggest roadblocks that will cause us to miss out on our blessing. You see, we try to take everybody with us on the journey that God is calling us to travel on. You see, everybody's not going to understand what God is calling me to do. Everybody's not going to understand what God is calling you to do. So the thing that we've got to realize is that sometimes God calls us to do things that are out of the norm. And those same people that we're trying to carry on with us are going to hinder our move because they're going to question everything that we do that God has called us forth to do. Now, 2 Corinthians 5 and 10 reads as thus. It says, "For we must all appear and be revealed as we are before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive his pay according to what he has done in the body, whether good or evil, considering what his purpose and motive have been, and what he has achieved, been busy with, and given himself and his attention to accomplishing." Now, when we look at that verse, we see that the pronoun used is he. Not one time in that verse does it ever say they, does it say them, does it say mama and them, does it say auntie and uncle, does it say best friend, does it say girlfriend, wife, husband, whatever. It says that we are responsible for our own walk within Christ. So what we've got to understand is this, that we cannot take everybody with us. You see, some people are not enriching to our lives because what they tend to do is they continually introduce bad elements that we're trying to keep ourselves away from. You see, we cannot save everybody. That job is reserved for Jesus Christ. You see, we don't walk around with an S on our chest, but we do walk around with a cross on our back, and I cannot carry my own cross and then hook yours on to my own back with me. You see, we cannot be everybody's footprints in the sand. That job is reserved for God. But you see, God is calling us out of Haran. And as we learned earlier, that place means parched. It means dried out. God is calling us away from that place of indecision, from that place of desolation. You see, God is calling us out to be better than what we are right now. But we cannot be what God is calling us to be unless we are dedicated to all that he has called us to do. So in closing, we've got to remember that we've got to be dedicated to the call, no matter how out of the way it seems. As we learned in the first sermon, if God called Abraham to sacrifice his own son, we've got to be dedicated when we've got requests that seem a little bit out of the ordinary. And as we learned last week, when God makes the promise, patience, we've got to be dedicated to being patient to seeing that promise come to pass. And this week we learned that even if we have to go at it alone, we have to be dedicated to taking that road that is less traveled. So let us remember that in order for us to receive the blessing that is within dedication, then we have to be dedicated to following the instruction of God. Now, there may be someone here that has not been as dedicated to the call as you should have been, but today is your opportunity to to rededicate yourself to God.